Hey folks, I'm going to do a really quick and informal voiceover here for you of this PowerPoint. It's kind of a test run to see how I can do things in different ways. But this PowerPoint is going to talk about different reasoning patterns that we use to think through problems. And this will be used when you are putting together your persuasive speech and when you are listening to persuasive speeches as well. So reasoning is defined here, I have on the slide, as creating patterns of relationships. We're trying to figure out how things connect together. It's how you make sense of information, how you decide whether or not to agree with that speaker. Or we might say how you make your argument, since we are talking about writing a persuasive speech. There are three types of reasoning that we're going to look at: inductive, deductive, and causal. And the first one I have for you is inductive reasoning. With inductive reasoning, we make a series of observations, so we see several things occur, and then we decide what that means based on the pattern. So if I were to see several emergency vehicles go by my house, one after the other, I might expect another one to come by soon, or based on what I know, I could combine that with what we call deductive reasoning and say there must be an accident somewhere. But the inductive reasoning tells me that it's likely that if I see several things happen, that another one might happen as well. So looking at a pattern and then forming a conclusion. So this next slide, I'm having a little weird thing going on with my mouse. With inductive reasoning, we take specific observations, multiple observations that are very specific, and we make a general conclusion out of it. And it's based on probability. So in the example I gave you of seeing the emergency vehicles go by, I might see a police car rush by, then I see a fire engine rush by, and then an ambulance rush by. My expectation or my deduction that a fourth vehicle may be coming by pretty soon, it's based on probability. I don't know for sure, and that's the thing to keep in mind, is with inductive reasoning, we don't know for sure. Here's another example. Let's say on Monday night my mom calls me at 7 o'clock just to say hello. The next day, Tuesday, she calls me again right around 7. And then on Wednesday, sure enough, she's on time. She calls me at 7 o'clock. Thursday rolls around. Now if I predict that my mother is going to call me around 7 o'clock, I'm using inductive reasoning to make that prediction. So we do this every day. It's really not super complicated at all. Now, is it a valid argument that she will call me on Thursday? Well, it's based on probability, so we don't know for sure. It's not 100% valid, and that's the one thing to be really careful about when using inductive reasoning. And this would be the same concept if you're researching your speech and you see several facts over and over again. If you have quite a bit of facts that back each other up based on probability, it's probably quite valid, but it's not 100% valid that it will happen again based on the evidence and facts that you have seen, because it's inductive reasoning. Here's another example, kind of having fun with this one. Let's say it's prom, I'm having a good time, I decide to try some tequila. And after I tried it, I got sick the next day. So I wait a couple of years and say, oh, maybe it was just something else. I'll try tequila again. I'm at a wedding. I try it. It does not go over well. Now, do I want to try tequila again? Now, if I use inductive reasoning and say, well, I see two specific examples that I got sick each time, I might predict that the third time I will get sick too. However, is this valid? Well, there could be other things involved, so it's not entirely valid. It's possible that I will get sick again, and maybe I just want to be safe and not do it. But it's probably not entirely valid because I only have 2 examples, and that's really not a lot to go on. There could be other things involved. So keep that in mind convince you of something in a persuasive speech. And as a speaker, don't try to convince your audience or persuade them based on very little evidence. Okay, moving on, we use reasoning to help make our case in a persuasive speech. I like to think about putting together a persuasive speech as if you're in a courtroom and you're trying to make a case. You have to prove what it is you're saying. You're making an argument. And an argument defined is making an assertion and using evidence to try to prove that it's true. And in that whole process, we use reasoning. So we're going to prove another case with inductive reasoning that's more likely a speech topic. Let's say that I want to propose that the drug awareness program, DARE, should be used in Kane County. Perhaps I live in Kane County. Now, if I say as proof that in Cook County they tried this program and it really worked, they had good success, and that in DuPage County it worked as well too, and then I took a look at Will County and they tried the DARE program and had decrease in drug issues. If I use this as my proof or my argument, I'm using inductive reasoning. So maybe I say, therefore we should try it in Kane County. That could be one way I could make an argument in my persuasive speech. That would be using inductive reasoning. So as a speaker, lead the audience through the information as you present your specific information in the cases. Deductive reasoning. Another type of reasoning is causal reasoning. And just like the name implies, it is assigning a cause-effect relationship between things. When 2 things occur near each other in time, if you then claim that one caused the other, you're using causal reasoning. It's saying one event results from another. So let's say I am going down in the city. I take I-55, I use my GPS in my car, but I get there late. Okay. Now, if I conclude or claim that my GPS made me late, I'm using causal reasoning because I used my GPS and I was late. Okay. Now, I'm sure you can see the problem with this. It could be true, but with causal reasoning, you need to be sure there aren't any other possibilities. With driving, yes, I kind of jumped ahead of myself with this slide. With driving, it could have been traffic. Maybe I stopped for coffee. Maybe my address was incorrect, or I didn't update my software. So you need to be careful. Going back to the tequila example, I could try to argue not to drink tequila based on causal reasoning, not just inductive reasoning. So if I said that I got sick after drinking the tequila, and then I say, well, the tequila must have made me sick, I'm assigning a cause-effect connection there. Now, it's possible. It's very likely. We know a lot of people who have issues with tequila, but it's not 100% certain that that one time the tequila made me sick. Maybe I had some weird seafood or didn't have anything to eat before drinking, and we know that's not a good idea. So it can be invalid for a lot of different reasons. Just have to be careful as a speaker when you're putting together that argument, that it's a logical, ethical argument. And as a listener, make sure that you are thinking through what someone is presenting to you. Now, causal reasoning has some variations to it. One event could result from a lot of things. So you think about crime. Crime isn't caused by just one thing. It's caused by a lot of things. It could be poverty, it could be psychological issues, it could be traumatic events. Many things combined can cause crime or poverty. One cause could have a lot of effects, so it's not always one thing causing one effect. For example, if you smoke, it can cause a lot of different types of health issues, not just one. Then we have causal chains too. Let's say you don't get enough sleep. And because you don't get enough sleep, it's hard to focus, you don't take very good notes in class, so when you take the test, your test doesn't go well. Then you get your test grade back and you're very upset. So it's one thing caused another. It's like a domino effect. So when looking at causal connections, make sure you keep in mind there are different variations. So that was causal reasoning, and we talked about inductive reasoning too. The third type of reasoning we use all the time, and it's the third one I'd like to talk about today. It's deductive reasoning. This is when we use things we already know in our head, and we put the pieces together to solve a problem or solve a puzzle. Like being a detective. You're given a clue, think about what you know about anything related to that clue, try to come up with a solution. What is the answer? So you're given a clue and use things, general concepts you've learned over time through school or reading and experiences to reach a conclusion. All right, another example of deductive reasoning is Aristotle, who I've mentioned before in a previous PowerPoint. He claimed that we sometimes reason through problems using what's called a syllogism. And we can look at that in mathematical terms, and then we'll look at it again. So a syllogism is claiming that when A equals B, right here, if we say A equals B, and we also know that B equals C, then we do know that A is the same as C as well. Okay? And that's deductive reasoning. All right, looking at it another way. If we know that all cats have 4 legs, and we know that Scooby is a cat, then we can make the connection that Scooby must have 4 legs. That's deductive reasoning. And this is much more reliable as long as we can prove the first 2 statements. If we can prove that all cats have 4 legs, without a doubt, and we can prove Scooby's a cat, then we know for certain that Scooby has 4 legs. There are a lot of different variations you'll find on the internet if you look up deductive reasoning. Sometimes they pose it as if P, then Q. So if Scooby's a cat, then he has 4 legs. So first you establish P, and is your specific example, and then you can deduct that Scooby has 4 legs. So if Scooby's a cat, he has 4 legs, because we've proven that all cats have 4 legs. If that does not make sense to you, that is okay. As long as you know the other examples I've provided, that is going to get you through deductive reasoning. But you can look this up, Google it, deductive reasoning, and find a lot of interesting examples. There are a lot of different variations on the deductive reasoning. Let's say we know that all cats have 4 legs here. Okay, if P, then Q. If something's a cat, it has 4 legs. So cat is P, 4 legs is Q. We also know then if something does not meet the requirements of Q, which is the 4 legs, well, like Vader, let's say I have an animal Vader and he's only got 2 legs. Well, then we know that he's not a cat because we established that all cats have 4 legs and Vader only has 2. Now we would probably have to give some stipulations here that it would be a cat that didn't have any birth defects or any surgeries. But a naturally born cat has 4 legs. So that's deductive reasoning. It's like process of elimination, really. Here's another example, kind of beating a dead horse here. That if I know that babies cry, and Elijah's a baby, I can then therefore prove to you that Elijah does cry sometimes. That's very simple stuff. We're going to not watch the rest of this. But inductive reasoning is forming a conclusion from a pattern. Deductive is adding a clue to what you already know. And causal reasoning is assigning a cause-effect relationship between two things that happen.